Welcome to Caregiver SOS On Air, presented by the WellMed Charitable Foundation, with nationally known gerontologist Carol Zernail and award-winning veteran broadcaster Ron Aaron. This program provides health, wellness, and other information for caregivers who are vital to the health and well-being of so many people across our country. And now, here are your hosts, Ron Aaron and Carol Zernail.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the award-winning Caregiver SOS On Air. I'm Ron Aaron. Our award-winning podcast available wherever you listen to your podcast. And we're also on the radio in several cities in Texas and Florida as well. We'll talk with our guest, Jessica Guthrie, in a couple of moments. But let me introduce our co-host today, filling in for Carol Zernail. Tina Smith is the Senior Director of Caregiver Program Operations through the WellMed Charitable Foundation. Tina has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social gerontology. She's been providing support to family caregivers for more than 30 years. Tina started her career working in the long-term care industry and then moved on to serving at the Bear Agency on Aging, and there is an agency on aging everywhere. Tina also taught gerontology courses at Kaplan University, and we are delighted, Tina, to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Ron. I always appreciate being here. I'm looking forward to talking to Jessica today.
Now, for those who are wondering, what is social gerontology?
I know it's not a name you hear very often, but it's actually the study of aging. Our older adult population has been growing for some time, and there's a lot of aspects to it people just aren't familiar with, and so we focus on those.
Well, let's take a moment and introduce Jessica Guthrie, talking about navigating the healthcare system, how families can better partner with healthcare professionals. Jessica is a caregiving strategist, Alzheimer's disease advocate, and a champion for invisible caregivers, who is transforming how organizations support the 63 million family caregivers across the country. For more than 11 years, she's been the primary caregiver for her mother, who is living with early-onset Alzheimer's disease, a journey that began when she was just 26 years old. As a young Black millennial and a solo caregiver, Jessica brings urgent visibility to demographics often overlooked in caregiving narratives, while addressing the disproportionate impact of Alzheimer's on Black communities. And Jessica, we are thrilled to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you all today.
Share with us the challenges you face and what you've been doing as a caregiver for your mom. Early onset dementia is not fun.
Far from it. But there are fun moments, but it is definitely not fun. So, hi, everyone. I am the full-time caregiver of my mother, Constance, who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 65. My mother was an educator. She was a community leader. She was the gospel choir director, someone who was bold in all the ways that she showed up. My mom raised me as a single mom. I'm an only child. And at 65, she was diagnosed. I was 26 years old, living in Dallas, Texas, wondering how in the world am I going to care for her while also still building my career and just growing as a young adult in the new city post-graduation. But I took this challenge head on, and I started out as an initial long-distance caregiver. So I was traveling back and forth between Dallas and Virginia literally every 3 to 4 weeks to prep meals, doctor's appointments, to create new systems, to ensure that she could still thrive even with an early diagnosis. I eventually moved back home, gave up everything in Texas, put my stuff in storage, and moved back home to my childhood bedroom in 2019, about 5 years into her diagnosis, because she started wandering and life got really difficult, and I could no longer just rely on doorbell cameras, right? I had to be there, and companion care wasn't enough. And we fast forward to 2025. My mom is now 77 years old. It's been 11 years, and she's now in the most advanced stages. She's fully bedbound, no longer ambulatory, fully dependent on me for everything. But I like to tell people that even though she's in the most advanced stages, my mom still knows that I am her daughter, and I'm caring very well for her as best as I can and treating her with the utmost dignity and respect. So that's like the highlight of our journey. And I will say that for the most part, I have truly done this as a single solo caregiver. leaning on our community and the folks who have said yes to pouring into us. But you're right, this has not been fun. And I say, and people say all the time, right, this is a disease that is the long goodbye. And that's so true in the sense of I've watched my mom change over time. But the thing that I'll say, there is so much joy and love on this journey because even though things are changing, I get to see my mom in new lights. I get to hold space for her to laugh and to feel connected to music. I get to find ways for her to feel seen and affirmed. And that in itself brings me so much joy making new memories with her.
All right, now hold that thought. I want to come right back to you. But let me let folks know who may have just joined us. You're listening to the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air, our podcast available wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also on the radio in several markets in Texas and Florida as well. Carol Zernail off today, and Tina Smith is filling in. We're talking with Jessica Guthrie, and we're talking about her journey as a caregiver for her mom, diagnosed 11 plus years ago with early onset dementia. And we're going to talk as well about how healthcare professionals and families can do a better job of working together. Jessica, let's go back 11 years. Mm-hmm. What led you and your mom to seek that diagnosis? What was happening?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, we can go back 12 or 13 because we know the signs start much earlier before the formal diagnosis. But my mom was an educator. My mom was very routine. My mom had very clear systems and she did the same thing every single day. But I saw early on that my mom was beginning to repeat herself and ask the same questions over and over again. My mom would get agitated and or confused when she couldn't find things that she had misplaced. The straw that broke the camel's back, my mom got into a car accident on her way to church where she went multiple days a week, right? So the judgment of being able to like drive and make strong decisions was in question. And so around that time is when I said, we have to actually maybe look into this because her short-term memory was a huge concern. And that's when I decided to connect her with a local neurologist. And we went through the series of tests for about a few months. And that's when he said, given all the signs, we believe it's early onset Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm.
How did she take that diagnosis?
You know, I think my mom knew for a long time that something was off, but she, as many folks do, excuse me, tried to mask it. Oh, I'm fine. I was just testing you. You know, like my mom was like, I can still do it. You know, but I think my mom, I never saw my mom fully internalize the diagnosis in the moment. I think she was like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? You know, like my mom, I'm truly my mother's daughter in the sense of like, let's hit the ground running and figure out how we're going to continue to live our lives. And that's very much what I saw from my mom. But I'll tell you, about 5 years in, we were in the stage of this disease where you kind of go through like depressive states, crying fits, you know, very like low because you realize your friends stop calling, your family stops calling, people don't come by. And it was in those moments where I really saw that my mom didn't necessarily know all that was happening, but she knew that people were changing around her and she did not like that. And she knew that things were not the same, but she never said, I have Alzheimer's disease.
How did you deal with it?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I was a young professional. I was 26, very career driven. I was like, I had plan A, B, and C. This was not on my vision board whatsoever. But, you know, for me, and I say this all the time, I didn't know that I was grieving. We don't talk about grief enough, especially the anticipatory grief and grieving someone who is still alive. But I was grieving seeing my mom no longer be my person, my mom and our relationship and who we were together, even grieving who I was supposed to be before 30. And so for me, I hit the ground running. And so I stuffed all my emotions down immediately. But then when I would fly back to Texas and I was by myself in my apartment, I'd be up all night long, just thinking, full of insomnia. I'd cry myself to sleep. I very much felt so alone and isolated because my peers at 26 weren't talking about caregiving. I didn't know anything about dementia. I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. There was no guidebook. And so it's the most isolating, lonely experience, especially as a younger caregiver.
And then
How did you get, I was just going to say, Yeah, how did you get yourself? Because I mean, looking at you today, you seem very self-assured. I know that you have an Instagram page. I follow you on Instagram, and you just show just such the realities, just the day-to-day things. And so, how did you get to this point from being that 26-year-old career-driven this way, then having to take a complete, do a 180, and you're, how did you do that?
Such a good question. I think that, every day I'm still learning and growing and evolving, but I started sharing so publicly on social media because I didn't see people who looked like me caring. I didn't see stories that looked like mine being elevated around the story of Alzheimer's and forms of dementia, right? Like when I first started this journey, people were like, go to support groups, go check out, the Alzheimer's Association, which are really great. I'm not knocking any of that. But at 26, when you go, you realize, oh, this space was not for me, right? Everyone in this room is closer to retirement, caring for older parents, and truly aren't like young Black 26-year-olds. And so that was my experience in rural Virginia, right? But that's why I turned to social media. And honestly, me sharing my story so openly and getting connected to people around the world and realizing like my story's not unique. My story's actually one of millions, and people just need to feel seen and affirmed and validated in what they're thinking. And that opened up a whole world for me because instead of feeling isolated and alone, I now felt connected and seen and wanting to create community. And so over the last 10 years, I've built this online community where, there's folks who are either starting their journey, have finished their journey in the throes of it, and we truly get to hold each other while figuring out, how do we support our people best.
Stay with us. We're going to come right back to you, and I want to congratulate you on being a Dartmouth College graduate, an incredible institution. That's pretty good news. Tina Smith filling in today for Carol Zernail, and we're delighted to talk with Jessica Guthrie. We'll talk more about her journey and flip to how healthcare professionals can better partner with family caregivers. I'm Ron Aaron. You're listening to the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Well, thank you so much for listening to Caregiver SOS on air. We're delighted to have you with us. We come to you every week with a discussion of an issue, a problem, some accomplishments involved in caregiving with more than 60 million caregivers across this country, but most thinking they are the Lone Rangers. We try to bring you the latest information and help that can make that job easier and more manageable. Caregiver SOS on air takes a look at trends across this country. We provide tips on how to be a better caregiver and, most importantly, where you can go for help. On Caregiver SOS on air, we try to give you what you need to make that caregiving manageable and to provide you with the help that can make your life easier. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernail and I are delighted to co-host this program, and we're thrilled you've joined us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on Air podcasts available everywhere, brought to you by WellMed Charitable Foundation.
Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again.
Oh, we are so pleased you're sticking with us right here on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Our podcast available wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also on the radio in several cities in Texas and Florida as well. Jessica Guthrie is with us. She began her caregiving journey for her mom some 11 plus years ago when her mom was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, a diagnosis nobody wants. But when you get it, you got to deal with it. Tina Smith filling in for Carol Zernail today, and we're delighted to have Tina with us as well. So, Jessica, talk to us a little bit about what healthcare professionals in your life were like, and what hit you on the need for better partnership with families.
Great question. I like to say that I have navigated every aspect of healthcare with my mom, from the primary care physician, your doctor's office, to my mom has been enrolled with home health. So that's physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology at home. I put her on home hospice May 16th, 2022 for the first time. We were discharged in 23, and now she's back on hospice in 25. We have navigated palliative care, all also navigating home care agencies, as well as navigating the hospital multiple times. And so in navigating all of those systems, I learned very quickly that no one knows very much about dementia, number one. And number two is that I am truly my mom's eyes, ears, and mouth. And if I don't speak up and advocate for her, she's not going to get what she deserves, but also the quality of care is not going to be what she deserves. And so people have, don't get me wrong, everyone that's in the medical field, no matter what role you hold, they're amazing. They are so selfless and so overwhelmed with the realities of our care system. And in the midst of that overwhelm, there's still places where we can improve, particularly the relationship between family caregivers and those who are working day to day within the system.
Tina, what do you hear when you hear this?
Well, I mean, I think it's very common, and I think you're right. I mean, it's hard to, if you've got a loved one that's got a diagnosis of dementia, I have found, I think just nationwide, you find providers who, if you have diabetes, they've got a clear path. They've got, okay, these are the steps that you need to take. If you have congestive heart failure, these are the steps that you need to take. But too often, families that have that diagnosis of dementia, the next thing that comes out of the provider's mouth is, well, maybe come back next, in 6 months or a year and let's see how you're doing. And it's just, there's so much missed opportunity, and it's just so unfair to the patient as well as the caregiver. So something with ZAP. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, you hear everyone talk about it. It's not just me, right? We hear the stories of Emma Hemming Willis caring for Bruce, her husband, with FTD. And the first thing she says is like, I was expecting a guidebook and I left there with nothing. Like, it was the most heartbreaking first visit, And so we're all experiencing this. And I think, one of my greatest frustrations, but also now the thing that I really care about is how do we build stronger relationships between the family caregiver and those who are providing care, especially those coming into the home. Because I realized very quickly that, like, in the end of the day, I am the linchpin. The family caregiver is the backbone and the person that holds this whole thing together. Yet at the same time, we feel the most invisible, not listened to, and not trusted, right? And so how do we actually strengthen those relationships so that this feels like a partnership caring for our people versus what often feels like a push and pull, a pull and tug, and or just like a forget it, I'm gonna figure it out on my own.
Now, are there additional challenges for the Black family, for you as a 26-year-old single Black woman and for your mom?
I think I like to say that I kind of had the trifecta of like being a young, so I was, younger than 30, Black and solo caregiver. And I feel like for me and my experience, we've had to navigate what I feel has been like an uphill climb of being listened to and believed, especially in the hospital system. I'll never forget taking my mom because she had pain. But of course, with an Alzheimer's diagnosis, you have to be diligent of collecting all the data points. And my PCP didn't believe my mom's pain. I went to the emergency room 2 days later. My mom had a hernia and needed emergency surgery. But it's because the doctor was thorough enough to listen to us. I think about the other instance where we went to the ER because my mom had fallen because she had pain in her knee, but he didn't look far enough down to like see the bigger picture. He sent us home with narcotics. I go to the doctor a couple of days later with my mom. She actually has a DVT, a blood clot in her leg, which he could have seen if he had taken more time to listen to us. Her. Yeah, right. And so I think about the doctor who was like, oh, she doesn't need that medication. I don't believe it works. Right. Those are just three very specific instances of me sharing the data points, me being my mom's voice and still brushed off. And so, excuse me, I don't want to say that it's solely because of my race or solely because of my age or solely because I was by myself. But I do think I can't look at the history of how people have been treated within our medical community and the history of oppression in this country and not put those pieces together. I think the biggest thing that I will say when it comes to navigating any form of dementia in the Black community is truly just getting over the stigma of the disease. And actually, when you notice signs, leverage your resources to go get the help that you need. But what we also need is for medical providers to listen and believe that there's something else wrong and not just brushing families off. that's the biggest gap that I notice.
Now, when you accompany your mom to a doctor and they see your mom, then they see this young girl, the tendency is not to listen to you.
Correct. Hmm. Even though I'm Ivy League educated, have a master's degree, have done all of my research, and I'm coming in with a book full of questions and observations, I
Right.
am more prepared than most. And it still feels as if I like don't know what I'm talking about. And it's like, actually, I'm here 24/7. I'm the expert. We're all the experts in our people. If you're a full-time caregiver, you're the expert. It is our job to paint the picture, and then your job to help put those puzzle pieces together.
So, what kind of systematic changes would you like to see in the system as it exists today?
Yeah, great question. I have a whole list of things, but the top things I'll say, number one, is when thinking about the care of people living with dementia, the family caregiver needs to be at the center of that care plan. Because if the family caregiver does not feel equipped, does not feel educated, does not feel supported, everything will crumble. Because what we do know is that the family caregiver is literally the backbone of our care economy. And we are the ones holding things up when folks get transitioned out of the hospital, when folks come out of rehab. Yet the family caregiver is missing vital education, vital resources and supports, and the financial support to be able to keep it going and to support their people well. So number one is making sure we elevate, support, and wrap our arms around the family caregiver in more intentional and thoughtful ways. I think the second thing is training our medical professionals to see the family caregiver as experts. As someone who's navigated a lot of people coming into the home, how do we actually train folks to build trust and build relationships where family caregivers feel like they're a partner? And that looks like, leading with curiosity, leading with empathy, asking questions versus making assumptions, right? Building on what the caregiver has done versus assuming that they haven't done anything. And so that's like the lowest hanging fruit, right? Building strong and meaningful relationships with the family caregiver. And I think the third thing, which is systematic, right, is that I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what our system does for people as they age. People don't understand Medicare, people don't understand Medicaid, and they think that when their person gets old, things just click in. But it's like, no, that's not true, right? We actually need for people to be educated early about the realities of what you need in place to be able to effectively pay for care and ensure you're getting the care that you deserve, whether it's a catastrophic event or whether you're aging and living with dementia. Those are the top three things I would say.
You must be dynamite testifying in front of a House or Senate committee.
I've done it a couple of times, and it's really exhilarating, actually, because I feel like I'm finally using my experience to help shift the reality for so many people coming up after me. So, yeah, thank you.
Now, as you look at the system that exists today, and we only have a couple minutes left, are you encouraged that people are beginning to listen to caregivers, or is it a day-to-day battle?
I think it's a day-to-day battle. But I do think that the care conversation is becoming way more prevalent, right? We're seeing it in the media. We're seeing it, the New York Times and the Washington Post has just had recent articles. So we're seeing people talk about care, but I'll tell you, folks do not understand care until they're forced to care for someone or until they're forced to receive care, and we can't afford to wait, right? And so I'm encouraged by the prevalence of the conversation, but I'm also concerned for the fact 1 in 5 caregivers are millennials, so my peers, and folks are not prepared or equipped to navigate the realities of what the next 5 to 6 years will look like for them. And so I really want to continue the day-to-day convos at the dinner tables, at the water coolers, on social media, so that people aren't caught off guard like I was at 26.
So you have a master's degree. When do you start law school?
I have no desire to go to law school. However, I've always had the vision of being Dr. Guthrie. And the deeper I go into this, I definitely want to get my doctorate in studying how to better support family caregivers in this country. So that's
cool.
On the list. Yes.
Tina Smith, you get the last word.
Sorry, I appreciate your spirit, and I hope, and I agree. I think that we're starting to see more recognition of caregivers, but thank you for your work in shining that light on the need for this. It's just so important. So I didn't know if
Yeah,
you had like
glad
any
you-
last.
Keep hitting home runs.
Yes.
Jessica Guthrie, we thank you so much for being here and for the work you've done over the past 11 plus years caring for your mom. You have learned a great deal, and the beauty is you're wanting to share that with folks across this country. So I thank you for joining us. For Tina Smith and for Jessica Guthrie, thank you so much for joining us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS On Air. I'm Ron Aaron. We will talk with you soon. The executive producer for Caregiver SOS On Air is Daniel Calderon. The producer is Sharice Pendleton. And the associate producer is Catherine Oglesby. We'll see you next week on Caregiver SOS On Air.
You've been listening to Caregiver SOS On Air, an exclusive presentation of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. We welcome emails with suggestions and comments on this program at radio@wellmed.net. Join co-hosts Carol Zernail and Ron Aaron next week for more on caregiving, improving the health and well-being of caregivers and their care recipients everywhere. For more on caregiving and podcasts of our programs, visit caregiversos.org.